What's up, how you doing? Here we are, Monday night, 8 p.m. Nice night, a little crispy out, but not bad. I was thinking of neighbors that I've had over the years. And when I was a kid living at my parents' house, my bedroom was where the backyard is. So if I opened up my window, I could see the backyard. And diagonally across from me was a family. They had a son who had Down syndrome. And they had their kitchen window faced my window diagonally. And I would get up sometimes at 4 o'clock in the morning over the years, and they were always awake. Both of them had their table facing the window, and they would be there sipping coffee and having a conversation every day. It didn't matter if it was a holiday, it didn't matter if it was a Sunday or a Saturday. They were up at 4 o'clock in the morning sipping the coffee. And they had those fluorescent lights in the kitchen. So it's like, what are these people talking about every single day? But they were early birds. And their son had Down syndrome, and occasionally I would jump the fence and I would go and play with him. He had all these little toy cars you would get in and drive around on his property there. And he thought he was Cooter from the Dukes of Hazzard. He would stop me and change my tires like I was a race car driver, and I would spend hours there. And I never knew, but well, one day I jumped over the fence. He called me over. He was 17 at the time and I was 10, and I thought he was 10 and I was 10, but he was 17. I couldn't believe it. He was like a lot younger than he looked. I mean, a lot older than he looked. That's what I wanted to say. So one day I jump over the fence and I'm playing with him for a little bit, and all of a sudden I see a girl at the window of the house, and she looked like she was maybe a couple of years older than me, and she's like, "Hi," blonde girl. And I said, "Hi." I never seen her before. And she's like, "I'm his sister." I was like, "Oh, he has a sister?" First time I've heard. So that was the first and last time I saw her. I don't know why she didn't live in that house with them, but so I had them. And then next door to them I had another neighbor. She was an old woman, lived alone. I think at one time she may have been married and her husband died, but she lived alone. And you'd always see her, you know, cutting grass or something. LAPD, I don't even have to look. LAPD. So anyway, yeah, that's what she would do. And occasionally I would kick a ball over. I would go over the fence and land in her yard, and I would sneak over there. And she had these little tiny houses with lanterns inside. And to me, it was like a magical place. I was like a first, second grader. I would jump and explore her backyard, and then I'd leave immediately because, you know, you're trespassing. And then on our left side, we had an old couple, and the thing about the wife, she never ever came downstairs. She was always upstairs with the shades down. Now, unless they went somewhere, then you would see her, but she never came down to sit in the yard. She never did any of that. She was always hiding in the house. And then he had a Chevelle, a gray Chevelle. He used to park it across the street in some garage, and he would go and grab it, and then he'd take her somewhere. They died. And then across from me was an old woman. I remember when I was like 13 or something, she calls me up and the phone rings. I didn't think it was for me. My mother picked up and she's like, "It's for you." It was the neighbor across the street. And she says to me, "Can you come over?" And we just had a snowstorm, and clean my snow. And I said, "Sure." So I went over there, I cleaned the snow, and I finished the whole thing. I cleaned her driveway, her car, her sidewalk. It was a corner house, so you had to do both sides. And once I finished, I started to cross the street to get to my house, and I heard the door open, and she called me. I turned around, and so I went, but she did one of these, and I get to the door, and she opens up the door, and I see her hand stick out, and she had an envelope, or an envelope. And she goes, "That's for you." And I said, "No, it's okay. I'm just, helping you out." And she's like, "No, no, take it." So I took it and I went upstairs and she had $30 inside. I guess she figured that was enough, which to me, I would have done it for nothing, but she made up her own mind. $30, here it goes. So from that point on, for the next few years, anytime there was any kind of snow, she would call me up and give me a white envelope. And we had that kind of an agreement. Next door, on the other side of me, I had neighbors, the husband and a wife, no kids, and then they had the aunt and the sister who lived upstairs. And the husband was like a watchdog. You could not sneeze without him knowing. He would pull the curtains and look. You'd see two eyes looking outside. Nobody could come to my neighborhood unless he authorized it. I'm telling you, if it was somebody in the neighborhood that he didn't find, decent, that looked suspicious to him, he would go outside and look around and maybe even call the cops. We had him, and then we had the lady upstairs. She lived to be 105. And they all died, because this is many years ago. Very nice people. They were from Ireland. The husband was Italian. And then next door to his house was an old woman whose husband had just died when I was little. I was like this big, he died. And then she had a big Saint Bernard dog. And she used to wear this, she was like an old woman. She had red hair, dyed it red, combed to the side, long, chubby. And she was like this with the dog, very close. So she would get out every morning. She had the dog on a clothesline. There was a clothesline up above and a leash connected to it. And the dog would run around like a nut. And then she would come out and pet it. And then she got a little bit, older, and she couldn't feed him anymore. So she called my neighbor, the Italian guy, to help her feed the dog. And he would be over there feeding the dog. Then the dog died. And within a month, she died. And my neighbor would go over there and sit in her backyard on a beach, one of those beach chairs. So then he died. Across the street from that house, next to the lady that I used to shovel for, was a couple that, it was like a little man and a little woman, and they were always fighting with the neighbor. There was always a dispute about the property line or something. They were always fighting. And then they died. Eventually everybody died, and next door was another husband and wife. I don't think they had kids. These were like three little houses, 1, 2, 3. The other one was a nurse, but there were this couple, the guy's name was Barney. His wife never came out of the house. Never ever came out of the house. He would go somewhere, he would go grocery shopping. She never left the house. She would open up the door and say bye to him, and then I would hear he was always doing some golfing somewhere. He would come out with his golf bag, and then he'd leave for a few hours. His name was Barney. Barney had a shaved head, nice guy, very friendly. He had a little station wagon, and next door to him was an old woman. She was a retired nurse. I never saw a husband there. From the time we were there, I never saw anybody but her there. She had these 2 dogs, and they were constantly running back and forth by the fence. And if you were a kid and you drove your bike there a couple of times too many, she would tell you, "Hey, you're annoying my dogs." So I had a neighbor. He didn't have a car, so he would go grocery shopping, and on the bus he would carry 2 bags with him of groceries. Well, one day as he was walking from the bus station to his house, he stopped where her house is, and he leaned against her fence with his grocery bags. And he took a little break, and then she opened the door, and she said to him, "Don't lean against my fence." And he said, "Oh, I'm sorry," and he left. He never stopped there again. But we had a lot of, interesting people. You always looked at them and you're wondering, what are they doing today? What's going on? What are they talking about? Just interesting people. And then way over on the other side, there was another house, big house, had 6 garages. He would rent all those out to different neighborhood people, and he had one of those table saws in his garage, and he was always cutting wood, and he lived to be 95. So one day he was cutting wood, and all of a sudden we see an ambulance there, and he ended up cutting his hand. The fingers came right off, and I don't know if they reattached him, because this was during a time when they had that capability. So I don't know what happened. I think they attached him. I think my father went over there one time and he was wiggling his fingers. So we had that, but there was a lot of neighbors, and I've had neighbors. There was a guy who lived alone, kind of creepy guy, and at nighttime he had his kitchen next to our property, big window, and if you were sitting and looking, you could see him in the kitchen. So at 2 o'clock in the morning, he would be out there in the kitchen with his pajamas going back and forth like something was chasing him. And the thing that made the biggest impression on me was when he would brush his teeth. He would brush his teeth in the kitchen, but he would brush them with anger, put the toothpaste on with fluoride, and he would be like, "Ah," back and forth. And he would do that for a long time, and I was like, how are those teeth still in his mouth? I mean, the enamel should be scraped off, those gums should be bleeding, but he's the only one I've ever seen brush his teeth with such anger. And the other thing I remember when I was a kid, the smell of cooking, at 6, 7 o'clock in the evening when everybody was home. You would be outside and you would smell like chicken or steak or onions or something roasting, and you'd be like, yep, people are cooking. Different time back then, different time. And sometimes I feel like those old people when I was a kid, they would say, when I went to the movies, we would buy popcorn and see a movie for 15 cents. I feel like those people now, because the time when I grew up, there was a lot more freedom for children, and it was just a different time. You had more individual responsibility. They allowed you to go to the little grocery store to get stuff when you were 5, 6 years old. Now they watch you. Can't go too far. If you go over a certain distance, they call you back. As a kid. But when I was growing up, they didn't care if you got lost. It was just part of growing up. But I remember all those neighbors, and every single one of them has died. There's not one that survived. So, anyway, that's it.